If you think about it, we've essentially molded our entire modern lives around uh, giant, inflexible mechanical clocks.
Oh, absolutely.
You walk to a specific metal pole on a specific street corner, stare at a printed schedule, and just sort of hope a massive metal box arrives at exactly 8:14 a.m.
Right, and if you're 2 minutes late, you're just out of luck.
Exactly. You just have to
Yeah.
be there waiting, completely submitting to the rigidity of a system that honestly hasn't fundamentally changed in a century.
Which is, I mean, it's an incredibly inefficient way to move millions of people. We've just accepted that the physical world of transportation has to operate on fixed tracks, fixed timetables, and, fixed supply.
Because the logistics of doing anything else were historically impossible.
Right, historically. But that's changing rapidly.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Today is Saturday, March 28, 2026, and we are unpacking a really radical reimagining of how human beings actually move through the world.
A total paradigm shift.
Yeah, we're looking at a very specific convergence of technologies. So self-driving software, solar integration, and hyperscaled mass production.
Which, when you combine them, could literally transform every single street, every country dirt road, and every suburban cul-de-sac into a 247 on-demand transit system.
It completely upends that century-old assumption that public transit has to be rigid. We're talking about moving from a system of fixed, stubborn supply.
To a system of infinitely flexible, real-time demand.
Exactly. And to map this out for you, we have a really fascinating stack of sources today. Our primary text is a deeply thought-provoking piece from a site called Netizen.
Written by Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
Right. The post is titled The Future of Mobility. Self-driving solar cars could turn every street into a 247 bus service.
Quite a mouthful, but it hits the nail on the head.
It really does. And Fuga isn't just, throwing ideas at the wall here. If you look at his background, he has a massive backlog of literature.
Hundreds of posts and books.
Yeah, just diving deep into AI, global trade, and economic philosophies. He constantly writes about what he calls the impending age of abundance.
His bibliography is incredibly dense. He frequently references concepts like agentic AI and something he coined called calcism.
Calcism, right?
Yeah, which essentially operates as an economic blueprint for this age of abundance. He views technology not just as a consumer product, but almost like a crowbar.
A crowbar to pry open entirely new societal and economic structures.
Precisely. And we're combining his theoretical frameworks with raw, real-time reality today.
Which is the best way to do a deep dive. Our sources also include social media reactions from literally today, March 28th, 2026.
Fresh off the wire.
Yep. We're looking at on-the-ground reports from Germany detailing actual unscripted public transit tests of autonomous driving in rural areas.
Which is a huge stress test for these systems.
Huge, along with live commentary from tech figures like Elon Musk, reacting to the friction between these rollouts and government regulators.
Because grounding the theory in the messy reality of what's happening on the pavement right now is absolutely crucial.
Right, because to understand how we get a quote-unquote bus service on every street, we first have to understand the physical hardware making it possible.
And why the economics of that hardware change absolutely everything.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Bagat's blog post argues that this vision isn't science fiction. It's the inevitable endpoint of three specific technologies crashing into each other right now.
The three pillars.
Yeah, let's look at the first pillar, autonomy. He points out that while today's electric vehicles are cheaper to run than gas cars, the absolute biggest expense in any transportation network is the human being behind the wheel.
The human driver is the ultimate bottleneck in transit economics. I mean, human labor is expensive, but more importantly, it has hard physical and biological limits.
We have to sleep.
Exactly. A human needs a salary, health benefits, mandatory breaks, sleep. There are shift changes, sick days, fatigue.
It's a lot of overhead.
A massive amount of overhead. But the moment you implement a highly capable autonomous system, that massive recurring operational expense just vanishes.
A single autonomous vehicle can operate around the clock, picking up passenger after passenger sequentially without ever clocking out.
And we really need to clarify what kind of autonomy we're talking about here.
Right. We aren't talking about adaptive cruise control.
No, not at all. We are talking about the leap toward level 4 and level 5 autonomy.
The level 4 meaning the car is fully autonomous, but perhaps restricted to a certain mapped geographic area. Right.
Correct. And level 5 meaning the car can drive absolutely anywhere a human can, under any condition, with zero human input.
That distinction is so vital, because only when you remove the human entirely do you unlock the true economic scaling.
But, autonomy alone isn't enough to drive the cost all the way to the floor. You still have to fuel the machine.
Which brings in the author's second pillar, which is solar integration. The text specifically highlights vehicles equipped with modern, highly efficient solar roofs.
Which I know sounds a bit like a gimmick at first glance, doesn't it?
It totally does. Slapping a solar panel on a car roof feels a bit, I don't know, retro-futuristic.
But the source notes that modern panels have crossed a serious efficiency threshold. They can actually generate sufficient energy for a large chunk of daily commuting needs.
Especially in sunnier regions, obviously.
Exactly. And what that does is it alters the operational downtime.
How so?
Well, think about it. If a traditional electric fleet vehicle is low on charge, it has to be physically taken out of circulation, driven to a charging depot, and plugged into the grid.
Which costs both time and money.
Right. But a solar integrated vehicle is passively refueling itself while it sits parked on a neighborhood street waiting for a hail.
Or even while it's actively cruising at 30 miles an hour.
Yes. It drastically reduces the fleet operator's dependency on the traditional electrical grid.
Which perfectly sets up the third pillar, mass production.
The manufacturing side of the equation.
Yeah, the author mentions Tesla-level scaling or beyond. We're talking about hyper-standardized designs and automated assembly lines.
Driving the manufacturing cost of the actual physical car down through pure, unadulterated economies of scale.
Think about the smartphone revolution for a second. Just as the iPhone took a cellular phone, an iPod, a GPS tracker, and an internet browser.
Which all used to be separate, clunky, expensive devices.
Exactly, and combined them into one cheap, mass-produced slab of glass. This mobility paradigm does the exact same thing.
It combines the on-demand nature of a taxi, the shared utility of a city bus, and the privacy of a personal vehicle into a single, mass-produced unit.
And this combination completely shatters the traditional economic model of transportation. Fagat points out that the per-mile costs fall to fractions of what we pay today.
Fractions of ride-sharing or even traditional public transit. But to really understand why, we have to look at the marginal costs.
So essentially, we're taking the airline economic model, where an empty seat has lost money, but flying the plane costs roughly the same whether it's full or empty. And we're applying it to the street level. Break down how the marginal cost changes here.
Well, think about the life cycle of a private car today. It's a wildly inefficient, depreciating asset.
The worst investment you can make, financially speaking.
Absolutely. You pay tens of thousands of dollars for it. You pay for insurance, maintenance, and fuel, and it sits completely idle.
Parked in a driveway or an office lot for about 95% of its lifespan.
Exactly. Now, public transit, conversely, has incredibly high fixed and operating costs.
A city has to pay for the massive bus, the maintenance, and the driver's hourly wage, regardless of whether that bus is full.
Even if it's carrying 50 passengers or driving its route completely empty at 11:00 p.m.
So an empty bus is just a massive cash furnace for a city.
Precisely. It's burning taxpayer money. But an autonomous solar-powered car fundamentally changes that math.
Because the overhead drops.
Once the vehicle is manufactured and deployed, the cost to operate it for one additional mile, the marginal cost plummets close to zero.
There's no driver to pay per minute.
And the quote-unquote fuel is partially gathered from the sky for free.
Right. Therefore, the vehicle transforms from a static, depreciating driveway ornament into a constantly moving, hyper-efficient public utility.
Because the overhead is so low, a ride in one of these autonomous pods can match or even beat the price of a standard $2 bus ticket.
Which means we are no longer just theorizing about hardware. We are talking about how this incredibly cheap technology moves from the assembly line onto the pavement.
Changing the actual geometry of how we commute.
The blog offers a pretty sharp critique of traditional public transit here, pointing out that buses and trains leave massive coverage gaps.
The minute you step outside a dense metropolitan center, the coverage just vanishes.
Because they're tied to fixed routes. If you don't live near that metal pole we talked about, the system is totally useless to you.
And the proposed flip here is profound. Self-driving solar cars don't follow rigid routes. They act as a fluid, reactive swarm.
You hail one from a quiet suburban cul-de-sac or, remote gravel road, and it routes itself directly to your front door.
You can choose to pool the ride with neighbors heading toward the city center to lower your cost to literal pennies.
Or pay a slight premium to ride solo if you want privacy.
And in dense urban areas, the author notes these fleets would operate as centralized microtransit networks.
Because they're coordinated by a single predictive app, they optimize routes on the fly.
which eliminates the phenomenon of thousands of private cars slowly circling blocks looking for street parking.
Which is actually a major driver of urban congestion.
It's a huge percentage of city traffic, just people looking for a place to put their empty metal box.
But here is the most incredible part of our source stack today. We have real-world validation, proving this isn't just a utopian whiteboard exercise for the year 2040.
We have actual data.
We have social media sources from today, March 28, 2026, showing this exact dynamic playing out on rural European roads.
The reports coming out of Germany right now are highly illustrative of the current state of the art.
We have tweets from tech observers Sawyer Merritt and Gunter Best. They're reporting on a German television segment that actually tested Tesla's full self-driving.
Specifically, the FSD supervised V14 build.
Right, operating as public transport in rural German areas. And let's paint a picture for you of what this actually looked like.
Because they weren't testing this on a perfectly mapped, sun-drenched grid in Arizona.
No, they were out of the country. The environmental context is critical here.
Rural European roads are notoriously complex. They're often very narrow, lacking clear lane markings.
Peppered with unpredictable pedestrian and agricultural traffic. Tractors, animals.
Exactly. And subject to rapid weather shifts. It's a very chaotic environment for a computer.
And the quote from the German TV reporter is striking. They said, "I was genuinely impressed. In the situations where we experienced the system, it worked perfectly and safely."
Which is high praise from a skeptical reporter.
They went on to say, "I hadn't expected that, even in the bad weather conditions."
And Gunther Best corroborated this on his feed, noting he had a flawless FSD test ride in Frankfurt just a few days ago on March 24th.
And we should clarify what supervised V14 means here, just so we're accurate. It implies the software is handling the complex end-to-end logic of navigating these unlined country roads in the rain.
But a human is still sitting in the driver's seat, legally mandated to monitor it.
Right. They aren't asleep in the back seat yet.
Not yet. But it demonstrates that the core neural networks, the artificial intelligence required to parse chaotic, non-standardized environments dynamically, are maturing much faster than many anticipated.
The car doesn't need a pre-programmed track. It's interpreting the world in real time, just like a human brain does.
But, technology never exists in a vacuum. It inevitably crashes into political and regulatory realities.
Which brings us to a very timely tweet from Elon Musk responding directly to this German television test.
What did he say?
Musk tweeted, "Europe will love Tesla's self-driving. Due to the extreme regulatory burden of the EU, which in general stifles innovation in Europe, Tesla owners there have been stuck with basic lane following." Now, I wanted to take a quick impartiality note here for you, the listener. We aren't here to weigh in on EU policy or Musk's political stances or to critique international regulatory frameworks.
Absolutely not. Our focus is strictly on analyzing the source material.
Right. But his tweet perfectly highlights the massive tension we're seeing globally right now.
It's arguably the defining friction of our era. The velocity of software development versus the deliberate, cautious pace of government oversight.
Innovators look at a successful test on a rainy German road and just want to deploy the software globally tomorrow.
And regulators look at that exact same test and demand millions of simulated miles, standardized safety proofs, and algorithmic transparency before allowing widespread public deployment.
They both operate on entirely different risk models.
Completely different.
Okay, keeping that friction in mind, I want to push back on Fagat's utopian premise a bit, because the text leans incredibly heavily on the idea of these cars being solar-powered.
It's a major pillar for him.
But the German TV test we just talked about explicitly noted that the car worked perfectly, even in bad weather conditions. So if we have a massive fleet operating in notoriously rainy or cloudy cities like Seattle, London, or Frankfurt in the dead of winter, are we romanticizing the solar aspect?
That's a fair question.
Aren't we just trading our current dependency on the massive electrical grid for a dependency on the local weather forecast?
What's fascinating here is Fagat actually addresses this very pragmatic critique.
Yeah.
He anticipates this logistical hurdle.
He does.
Yeah, he isn't claiming that a panel on a car roof defies the laws of thermodynamics in a rainstorm.
Okay, good.
The text explicitly mentions the necessity of battery backups for cloudy days and acknowledges that these vehicles will absolutely require occasional grid top-ups.
So the sun isn't some magic bullet severing the car from the grid entirely?
No, not at all. And in energy economics, you don't really look for magic bullets. You look for margin increasers.
Margin increasers. Explain that.
Solar is framed here as a persistent, passive energy baseline that dramatically lowers the aggregate operational costs. Think of it this way. Every single mile powered by ambient sunlight is a mile the fleet operator didn't have to purchase from the city grid.
Right.
Over a fleet of 10,000 vehicles operating 247, those marginal savings compound into massive economic viability.
So even if they have to plug in during a rainy week in Seattle, the average cost per mile over the fiscal year remains incredibly low because of all the sunny days in July.
Exactly. It's about the aggregate average.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about aggressively lowering the floor of the operating costs over time. Which brings us to what I honestly consider the absolute most radical part of Bhagat's entire essay.
The spatial economics.
Yes, because if the technology works, if the AI can navigate a wet country road and the solar panels drop the energy overhead, the next massive hurdle is financial equity.
How do you serve the margins?
Right, because if you just leave this hyper-efficient autonomous fleet to the free market, wouldn't these cars just endlessly circle high population zones?
They'd cluster where the money is.
Exactly. They'd cluster in downtown Manhattan or downtown San Francisco, where they can pick up a new paying fare every 90 seconds. How do you financially justify sending an empty car 30 miles out into the woods to pick up one person on a remote farm?
Left strictly to unregulated market forces, you wouldn't. The free market demands density because density equals maximum vehicle utilization, which equals profit.
A car driving empty through rural Montana is literally just burning capital.
And that leads to the author's deliberate policy proposal, which is essentially the Robin Hood economics of averaging costs.
Robin Hood economics. I like that phrasing.
Bhagat argues that urban fleets, because of their massive volume of short back-to-back trips, will generate staggering surplus profits.
Because they're constantly full.
Right. So the solution is to mandate that those urban surplus profits are skimmed and then used to cross-subsidize the service in lower-density rural regions.
It's a really fascinating redistribution model, and the text is quick to point out that there is deep historical precedent for this.
It's not a new idea at all.
No. This is exactly how existing utility models, or universal service funds, work today for electricity, water, and broadband internet.
It's the exact same mechanic as the United States Postal Service, or the Rural Electrification Act from the 1930s.
Yes, if you think about the USPS, it costs an absolute fortune to physically fly a letter on a bush plane to a remote cabin in Alaska.
A massive logistical expense.
But the stamp on that envelope costs the exact same amount as a stamp used to walk a letter 3 blocks across Manhattan.
The incredible density and profitability of the urban postal routes actively fund the massive unprofitable distances of the rural routes.
The density subsidizes the distance.
Exactly. And Bhagat suggests that to ensure this mechanism functions in a modern transit network, governments or regional public cooperatives could own portions of these autonomous fleets.
To mandate coverage.
Right. This ensures a guaranteed minimum service level everywhere, establishing mobility as a fundamental right rather than a luxury tied to your zip code.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Because if I'm a taxpayer living in a dense city paying my daily transit fare, I might riot if I find out my fare is being artificially inflated to fund empty robot cars driving around the countryside.
It's a common objection.
Why should the city dweller agree to subsidize rural connectivity?
Because it isn't framed as charity in the text. It's framed as macroeconomic self-interest.
How so?
The source outlines the macroscopic payoff quite clearly. When you connect rural economies to the broader network affordably, you boost overall national productivity. Farmers, remote workers, and residents of declining small towns suddenly gain frictionless access to regional job markets, specialized healthcare, and educational centers that were previously geographically gated.
So a rising tide lifts all boats. But how does that directly help the city dweller paying the subsidy?
The text explicitly notes that cities benefit massively through reduced urban sprawl pressure.
Real estate.
Exactly. Right now, people crowd into insanely expensive, dense city centers because that's where the jobs and the transit hubs are.
You have to live near the metal pole.
Yes. But if you can live affordably in a small town 50 miles away and still have immediate, cheap, autonomous access to the city center whenever you need it, the pressure on urban housing markets drops.
Rents go down.
Theoretically, it creates a much more balanced, distributed national workforce.
You know, diving into Bhagat's background really adds weight to this argument. Looking at his massive list of writings, he constantly references this concept of calquism and the 20% growth revolution.
He weaves it into almost everything he writes.
He doesn't view this transit model as just a neat engineering trick. He views it as a foundational pillar of a larger philosophical shift.
Calquism, in his writing, seems to be the belief that we are entering an age of abundance, where AI and automation literally solve the problem of physical scarcity.
Provided we build the right equitable distribution models, like these cross-subsidies.
He is positioning technology as a democratizing force. The hardware is just the enabler. The economic policy is what dictates whether the technology creates a utopian abundance or just exacerbates existing inequalities.
Okay, so the economics theoretically work for getting me from my rural house to the local grocery store or into the nearest city, but the source material expands the lens massively in its second half.
It scales up.
Because what happens when I need to go 300 miles? A little solar-powered local pod isn't going to cut it for a trip from Montana to Chicago.
This is where Bogot's vision scales from a localized utility into a massive national infrastructure project. The text introduces the integration of self-driving cars with autonomous buses and high-speed trains.
Creating what he calls the multimodal symphony.
He outlines a perfect division of labor. Let's break down this three-tiered hierarchy.
Okay, tier 1.
At the local level, handling the first mile and last mile, you have the self-driving solar cars we've been discussing. They operate inside cities and towns, picking you up curbside.
Then for the medium-haul trips distances of roughly 50 to 300 miles, the system utilizes self-driving buses.
And the text notes these aren't traditional buses. They'd also feature massive solar-assisted roofs to capitalize on their large surface area.
And they'd run on shared or dedicated highway lanes.
Crucially, just like the local cars, these autonomous buses have no fixed schedules.
No middle poles.
No middle poles. They are route optimized in real time based on wherever the regional demand is flowing.
And finally, for the massive cross-country long-distance travel, the system relies on high-speed self-driving trains.
We are talking about trains cruising at over 200 miles per hour on dedicated, upgraded tracks, moving hundreds of passengers simultaneously.
Powered entirely by renewable grids, utilizing industrial solar and wind.
But the true innovation in Bogot's text isn't just that these three modes of transport exist. The innovation is the friction-free layer connecting them all. The text describes a unified mobility platform. You can think of it as an omnipotent Uber for everything application.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the text walks through a very specific user experience. Imagine you're booking that trip from a rural cabin in Montana to a downtown office in Chicago.
Today, that's a logistical nightmare.
It involves driving to an airport, paying for parking, going through security, flying, landing, and hailing a cab.
Exhausting.
In this envisioned future, you just open an app, enter your destination, and tap once.
The system maps the entire multimodal route instantly.
It books the local solar car to pick you up at your cabin, it books your seat on the regional bus, and reserves your cabin on the high-speed train, all on a single dynamically priced ticket.
And it actively manages all the stress points of travel. The text highlights details like automatic luggage handling,
where your bags are mechanically transferred between vehicles without you touching them,
and proactive rerouting. If a snowstorm delays your high-speed train, the platform's algorithm automatically swaps you onto a faster alternative bus route.
or adjust the arrival time of your local pickup car without you having to frantically call a customer service desk.
But the text uses the phrase seamless transfers. It describes a physical reality where you step out of a car, walk 3 steps, and step right onto a bus just as the doors open.
Without ever scanning a QR code, swiping a card, or showing a ticket to a human being.
Exactly.
So I have to ask, is this text describing a beautifully functioning public-private partnership? Or is it outlining a terrifying, monolithic tech monopoly that literally controls all human physical movement across the entire continent?
That is the ultimate tension of any centralized platform. However, Bogot's text specifically describes this platform as public-private, solar-smart, and designed for equity.
So it's not just one mega corporation running the world.
It does not envision a single Silicon Valley corporation holding the keys to human movement. Rather, it suggests a cooperative, open protocol model.
But how do seamless transfers work technologically without a monopoly?
You have to look at the communication layer. Coordinating 3 entirely different modes of transit built by different manufacturers requires an open API, A standardized language.
Like V2V communication, right? Vehicle to vehicle.
Exactly. The local car needs to talk directly to the regional bus. It's like a localized hive mind.
The car tells the bus, I am carrying passenger X. I am exactly 43 seconds away from the transfer depot. Hold your departure.
It doesn't rely on bouncing a signal to a central corporate cell tower hundreds of miles away. It is a localized peer-to-peer communication standard.
Which transforms transportation from a chaotic collection of isolated vehicles fighting for space into a single, intelligent, breathing web.
It essentially engineers wait times out of existence.
But to build a web that intelligent, to engineer wait times down to zero, the system needs data.
An unimaginable amount of data.
Which brings us to the realities, the roadblocks, and the actual physical impact this would have on our cities. Because a vision this grand cannot simply be spoken into existence by an app.
The physical and regulatory hurdles required to build this multimodal symphony are staggering. And to the author's credit, the text is transparent about this in a section dedicated to challenges on the horizon.
Let's look at the infrastructure needed. To get high-speed autonomous trains running safely at 200+ miles per hour, we're talking about tearing up and upgrading thousands of miles of legacy rail.
We have to physically build those V2V communication networks on every highway.
We need to construct smart charging grids because, as we establish, the solar roofs are margin increasers, not infinite energy glitches.
Then you face the regulatory nightmares. How do you force a dozen competing auto manufacturers to adopt a single standardized V2V communication protocol?
Or, how do you ensure the unified booking app is truly inclusive, meaning it's accessible to the elderly, the visually impaired, or individuals who literally cannot afford a smartphone?
And the hardware limits are very real. We need vastly more refined, energy-dense battery technology and solar panels durable enough to survive a decade of being pelted by hail and road salt.
But if we clear all those hurdles, if this massive generational undertaking is actually achieved, the societal benefits outlined in the text are wild.
The environmental impact alone would alter the trajectory of the climate, transitioning away from millions of individual, inefficient fossil fuel combustion engines to a highly optimized, partially solar-powered fleet would drop urban transit emissions to near zero.
And there is one highly specific detail from the text that I absolutely love regarding urban geometry. It says, cities reclaim parking lots for parks and housing.
Think about how much premium central real estate in our cities right now, acres and acres of concrete, is dedicated purely to storing empty metal boxes.
If the autonomous cars are always moving, always outserving the next passenger, we don't need sprawling surface lots. We get our cities back.
It entirely changes the geometry of urban design. If cars are algorithmically optimized to avoid collisions and traffic jams, streets can be narrowed.
Sidewalks can be widened. Massive parking garages can be retrofitted into vertical farms or affordable housing. But I do have a major pushback here, and it's about the data required to run this utopia.
Let's hear it.
The text glosses over privacy with a very quick, breezy mention that settings let you choose how much data you share. But let's be real. If a single unified system knows exactly what time you leave your house every single day, exactly where you transfer, who you ride with, what route you take, and where you sleep.
It's a lot of data.
Isn't that a massive systemic vulnerability?
Mm-hmm.
How does an equity algorithm decide who gets the fastest route in a busy city without deeply, intrusively surveying the movement habits of every single citizen?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you're hitting on the ultimate, unavoidable trade-off of the digital age mapped onto the physical world.
The privacy tax.
Exactly. The text frames mobility as a public good. But to provide that public good with frictionless, zero wait time efficiency, the system absolutely requires total panoptic surveillance of movement.
The predictive algorithms cannot function perfectly if they are blind.
They need to know where demand is going to be before the human demand even knows it wants to move.
Right. It has to know I leave for work at 8 a.m. before my alarm even goes off.
So the tension is profound, and there is no easy technological off-ramp here. Do we, as a society, accept a localized, benign surveillance apparatus in exchange for a seamless mobility web that guarantees cheap, equitable access to movement for everyone while eliminating traffic fatalities and emissions?
Or do we prioritize individual privacy and accept the chaotic, inefficient, and deadly transportation system we have today?
That is a remarkably heavy question, and it really shows the depth of what Pagad is proposing with concepts like calciism. We aren't just talking about a cool new car with a solar panel on it. We are talking about drafting an entirely new social contract.
A contract regarding how we share physical space, environmental resources, resources and personal data.
It is a complete reorganization of human infrastructure.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, let's synthesize the incredible journey we've just taken through these sources. We started by examining the underlying hardware pillars,
The removal of the expensive human driver, the integration of passive solar energy to drop the operational floor, and the brute force of mass production.
which together shatter the traditional fixed-cost models of transit, allowing a car to become as cheap as a bus.
From there, we explored how this hardware flips the model from rigid, fixed routes to a fluid, real-time demand swarm.
Validated by what we are seeing today on the rainy rural roads of Germany.
We unpacked the critical Robin Hood economic policy of averaging costs, demonstrating how the surplus wealth of urban density could logically subsidize the connectivity of rural landscapes.
We analyzed the vast, multimodal symphony local cars, regional buses, and high-speed trains seamlessly integrated into a single, intelligent, V2V communicating web that entirely erases the friction of transfers.
And finally, we grappled with the massive infrastructural roadblocks, the deep privacy concerns of surveillance transit, and the ultimate reward of reclaiming our city centers from acres of asphalt parking lots.
It all ties back perfectly to Bogat's opening line about the impending age of abundance. He's showing us how a combination of AI, solar technology, and bold, equitable economic policy might actually deliver a historically utopian vision of universal, frictionless movement.
It is a vision where physical distance no longer dictates economic or educational opportunity.
So what does this all mean? I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over.
Something to think about on your current commute.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the cost of travel effectively drops to zero, and a perfectly integrated, predictive, autonomous network can seamlessly whisk you from a remote mountain cabin to a bustling downtown office while you sleep, does the very concept of a city become obsolete?
If you can live absolutely anywhere on the map without losing physical daily connection to everywhere else, how will that completely reshape where you choose to call home tomorrow?
It's a question that challenges the very foundation of human geography. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the future of mobility. As always, keep questioning the information around you and look deeply at the systems you interact with every day.
Because eventually you might realize that the rigid, fixed metal pole at the bus stop you've structured your entire morning routine around
Might just disappear. We'll catch you on the next episode.